As an emerging leader in your organization, do you know what candor is? Do you know what it looks like, feels like, smells like? It's a word that's gaining a lot of popularity, frequently used as a value for a lot of organizations. So we have to learn it. We have to embrace it. But unfortunately, it doesn't always show up in the same way. It's personal, it's interpreted, it's honest. So we're going to need to get a better understanding and handle on candor so we can create a better workplace. Our guest today will help with just that. Hold on. I'm Russel, host of the Relationships at Work podcast, the guide for emerging leaders to create a workplace we love. I've been in communications and leadership for decades now, and this podcast has always been such a really nice way for me to embrace that curiosity, both my own and yours, in better understanding emerging themes for organizations to improve workplaces, like our topic today, candor. Well, I can't even get the spelling right because there's a Canadian and American spelling, but that's the least of our worries. Really understanding the concept of candor is really, really important. It's something I've always struggled with. Now, if you've ever worked with me, you'll probably find that hilarious because I come off as very honest, very transparent as a person to work with, over the top in some ways sometimes. But it's how candor is delivered and what it looks like that I've always wanted to learn more about. Is it too much? Is it not enough? Is it presented in the wrong way? I've had some really interesting, deeper conversations with a lot of leaders that are having their own struggles with candor about how vulnerable, how much of themselves should they be presenting at work. We always talk about bring your whole self to work, but is that really always the best case? My guest today comes at it like me from a communications side. So Lisa Bloch, who's the senior director in communications at Mount Sinai, has some experience in this honest type of engagement. So let's go talk to her. And on the show today, we have Lisa Bloch, and here's why she is awesome. She is the Senior Director of Population Health Communications at Mount Sinai Health System, and she's got more than, she probably doesn't want me to say this, but it's a big deal. More than 30 years of experience in the communications field, and most of it's in the medical field. But truthfully, communications is communications. If I've learned that one thing. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Russell. Glad to be here.
Now, I started this a couple of shows ago where I want to start off every episode a bit with defining things. And we're going to get into that because we're talking candor today. And I'm really curious about how you define candor. But before we get there, we have to start here, which is the first question, which is what's your best or worst employee experience, Lisa?
All right. Well, I'm going to go back in my time capsule to the late 90s when I was in my, mid to late 20s. I was working for a publishing company that was based in New York City, international though. And one of our sales executives came into town from England, and we were friendly. He asked me when he saw me when my big day was, and I had recently gotten engaged, so I thought that's what he was asking about. And I said something like, "Oh, we haven't set a date, maybe in a year or so." And he said, "No, not that." And he pointed to my belly and he said, "Your big day for the baby." So you're shaking your head. I was not pregnant. I'd put on a little weight, but I was not pregnant. I was mortified. And I explained to him that I wasn't pregnant. He apologized, and I thought we were done. I thought that was the end of the story. Yet it was not. We had a kind of jokey relationship with each other to begin with, but every time he came into New York, he asked me how the baby was and joked about it, and it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. So it was a small company that I worked for. There was no HR department I could go to. I went to our general manager to discuss it with him because I didn't feel like it was something I could discuss with the executive. And the general manager was a very kind of honest, straight shooting guy. He reassured me that he would take care of it. I felt better until he took care of it. When he took care of it, he sent an email to the sales executive and blind copied me, I guess to show me that he was taking care of it. And I will never forget what the email said. It said, "Dear so-and-so, please refrain from commenting on the expanding girth of my employees." Anyway, that's the end of my story.
Oh my God. There's so much horribleness in that just to unpack.
There's a lot in there. And I'd say I probably learned two things. At the time, well, obviously I learned never to wear that outfit again, the one I was wearing when he thought I was pregnant. But the second lesson I didn't learn until years later, which is, if you're going to be candid, if you're going to be honest, authentic, with your employees or with the people around you, like, have some sensitivity and compassion for the people that you're working with. You can't have candor, and I guess we'll talk about defining candor. But candor doesn't mean you can say anything you want, and because you're being honest, and I truly don't think that this person meant ill when he was speaking to the sales executive about not commenting on my expanding girth. I think he thought he was doing the right thing. I mean, it was horrible and inappropriate, and certainly wouldn't pass muster today in today's world. And I felt terrible about it at the time and for a very long time afterwards, so much so that I will never forget what was said. But
Did they think
I thought that,
did they
yeah,
think they were being funny or with the email, or was it like, was there any follow-up from that email?
no, there was no follow up. And I don't think he thought he was being funny. I think that was how he saw things, and that is how he communicated. He prided himself in telling it like it is, and he always told it the way he saw it, and the way he saw it wasn't wasn't always the most appropriate way to tell it. So,
And you just brought up one of my favorite phrases when it comes to masked candor, which is, "I'm just telling it like it is," or "I'm just being honest," and oh, I want to dig into all that. But before we start that path, candor. Now, we always seem to have different definitions, or the Oxford Dictionary or whoever dictionary seems to be really bad at defining things. I.e., I looked up leadership the other day, and I kid you not, the Oxford Dictionary of Leadership is to lead people. I'm like, you just repeated the word again. It's not defining anything. So every organization's different. Sometimes it's very personalized, but I like to set the table on what we're even talking about. So, Lisa, how do you define candor?
I mean, I would say define candor as being honest and authentic when you're communicating. But again, it's got to have that compassion component, that empathy component added onto it, at the end. So it's, being honest, clear, authentic, and conscious of who you're communicating with, and the impact of your honesty, authenticity, and on who you're communicating with.
Well, you gave a perfect example of how not to do candor. Is there any experiences in your career that you can share that where candor was really well delivered and received?
I'd have to say that, in my current role at Mount Sinai, we have like a brand messaging toolkit that we use, and it kind of describes what our brand voice is, and it's got things like, we are clear when we communicate, we are compassionate when we communicate, and speaking clearly means being, as we were just talking about, being honest, authentic, accessible. And this toolkit, is for communicating with everybody, whether it's employees, whether it's you writing an email to the person sitting next to you, it's communicating with our patients, our doctors. And I'll just give one example of, how we can communicate more clearly. And when our marketing department rolled this out, every communicator had to attend a session where we actually sat together in small groups. We were given a paragraph of, something to talk about, and we were asked to write it, using this brand messaging toolkit. And we learned a lot of things like speak clearly and honestly, and use pronouns. You can use the word I when you're, if you're a corporation and communication is going from one person to others, you can use the word I. You don't always have to say we. There's not this big we behind everyone, but to speak with, authenticity and say, I, you, yours. Think about how things affect, the people that you're talking with. And I have to say that, the fact that the organization went through this and it's a big organization and we've got a lot of people that are communicating and marketing, and the fact that the organization took the time to make sure that everybody went through this training and actually had a writing session where you got 3 minutes to write a sentence about XYZ, or, and that can be unnerving to do that quickly and with other people. But I think that just speaks to the organization's wish and desire for everyone to be authentic. And, certainly during pandemic, we had a steady drumbeat of communications to staff, from the organization, that were all candid about what's going on within the health system, how many people are in the hospital with COVID, that sort of thing. And I've really seen, not to say that we weren't candid before pandemic, but the organization became a lot more candid, like during those 3 years, and really making sure that, we speak clearly and honestly and authentically with our employees and all our constituencies.
Is there a good and bad time for candor in the workplace? Sometimes it's not always well received. So I'm just curious of your thoughts on candor's. Here's a great time for candor, and here's maybe a yeah, no.
There are definitely bad times for candor. You know that expression where they say, praise your team publicly, but give them criticism privately. If you're in a meeting with a lot of people and a colleague or someone who reports to you makes a mistake or says something incorrectly, jumping in right there to say, you're wrong, it's not this, it's that, or, what the heck are you talking about? That's not what we discussed. That's not what we discussed last week. That is not something that you do publicly in a meeting with other people. I think that there are tactful ways to correct someone in a meeting. The expression where you say things like, let's take that offline, or we'll talk about that later. One place where I try not to be too candid is in large meetings. If I have an opinion that really differs from everyone, I'm not afraid to express it. But if I have an issue with someone or something that's said, I don't go at it like a dog with a bone in a meeting with other people. That's not the place to have a frank conversation. I mean, you can always talk to the person afterwards and say, like, what's going on? What happened? That's not what we talked about. So that's one place where I would definitely.
When I hear the word candor, I also can't help but think about power dynamics in an organization, because it sure seems like executive can be a lot more candorous than somebody speaking lower, quote unquote, lower in an organization. So how do you handle that when we're talking truth to power or colleagues that may have a step up? Because the phrase that I've heard before, which is it's a career limiting move if you are a little too honest. And I'm like, that's a broken culture if you're starting to use terms like that. So how do you feel the power dynamics influence?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it's come up in, it's come up with my communications team. We've discussed this quite a bit, because a lot of the people that we work with are physicians at Mount Sinai. And when you're a senior communications specialist and you're sending something to a physician saying, hey, look at this. What do you think? Do you approve this? We're putting your name on it. And they give you edits. It's hard to say, can I rephrase that thing that you wrote just a little bit? Or is it okay if I tweak that? And I've spoken to my team about really making sure, like giving them like permission to say, I like what you said. I like what you did. I'm going to, since we're communicators, I'm going to tweak it a little bit and just maybe give you 2 ways we could say it a different way. Because what can happen is you're afraid to challenge or speak to someone because they're a doctor. And number one, I mean, we, here in America, we've all grown up to, not challenge physicians. And frankly, when a physician or an executive rewrites something and says, can we say it this way? And my team comes back to them with a couple of other options or tweaks, they're always fine with it. It's really never been an issue. And really it depends on what you're being candid about too, with an executive. I can give somebody at a higher level than me feedback, um, gently.
People forget that candid or any type of communications, as a fellow communications nerd, it's all relationship based too. And I've seen some people start an organization and come out with a hammer when it comes to being way too candid and way too honest when they don't know how somebody's going to receive that information, or understanding, as we both know, it's all about the audience as much as about the message being shared. So candid, as you said, is not a blanket, we're just going to be honest, not realizing how the other person may or may not receive it. And that immediately also makes me think of culture, because what's candid to North American me is not the same of what candid means to, say, somebody from another country or another upbringing. So how do you approach that?
There's something that we talk about at work and on the leadership team that I'm on. We talk about facts versus story. So when you're being candid about something, try to stick to the facts. The facts are things that are like directly observable. If somebody recorded a situation, the facts are the things that you can hear and see. And the story is our, interpretation of the facts. It's the way we put structure and meaning around what's happening. And often the story can be the drama. A fact could be, it could be something simple as the fact is that I sent you 3 emails about something and you didn't get back to me. The story I put in my head is that you're not answering my emails. I'm taking it personally. You never answer my emails. You don't take the work that I'm sending you seriously. Why should I have to remind you 3 times to answer my email? So it's best not to. It's best to think about what the facts are when you're communicating candidly, at work. So you could say something like, I noticed you're very busy and haven't had time to review this email. Can I get 10 minutes on your calendar and we can just discuss this together? Rather than, as per my previous emails of January 3rd and February 7th, please review the attached.
Yeah.
Kind of like look at, facts versus story. Everybody's got their stories, and we all have stories in our head, and we all have our triggers and things that get our goat. But when you think about being candid and being straightforward and communicating, if you stick to the facts, I'm in marketing communications. I love to tell a story. That's my job. But when you're working on candor, it's good to focus on the facts of the story and not all of your emotions, around it.
I love that because, as you said off the top, candor being so much about truth, but truth is different for people based on their narrative, based on what they believe in their experiences. So I love the idea of just, if you stick to the facts, we can have our own interpretation of those facts, but the facts are the facts. And you did mention Mount Sinai had their own like branding, and I was immediately thinking you meant external, but really interesting to have it as an internal tool, that brand, tone, and so forth. But who sets the tone when it comes to candor in an organization? What sets the model of behavior for an organization? Does it need to be a branding toolkit? Because some organizations aren't that big. Some organizations are not feeling like they need to be as established when it comes to that tone. So who's setting it?
Leadership. The leadership sets the tone. If you have leadership that is able to say something like, I screwed up. Sorry about that. Let me correct it. If you have leadership that are real and can and approachable and are honest themselves, like they set the tone. And one thing that I really like about Mount Sinai is that our leadership is accessible. I've worked in organizations where, if you're a manager, you talk to other managers, or maybe you can talk to a director, and then the director has to talk to the senior director, and then that person can talk to the VP. It's not like that in where I work. My team, and others, we have access to senior leadership. There's a certain level of accessibility, and when you have that, it can be a good or a bad thing. where I work, it's a good thing because you can see the leaders walking the talk or whatever they say. And when the leaders behave with candor, then that trickles down because people, that sets the tone.
There's certainly been a shift with, and you brought up the pandemic earlier, certainly a shift with what employees' expectations are. And I'm not saying those expectations didn't exist before the pandemic. We're just more emboldened to tell you what those expectations are now, especially for people leaving organizations or demanding certain things. How are you feeling candor has changed based on, say, we'll do a big event like the pandemic?
Since the pandemic, with so many people working remotely, and and I'm thinking, in the workplace, it's not so easy to pick your head up and look around and talk to the person next to you, or walk by somebody's office and get a quick answer to your question. A lot of communication is via, Teams messages or IMs, texts, and via email. And I'd say like tons more is via, like, where I work is via Teams messaging and, text and stuff like that. Cause you kind of get a more immediate response with that than with email. Although there's certainly a lot more email too. I guess coming back to the candor thing, I've noticed that it's just there's so much more written communication that I honestly, I have to say, it drives me crazy sometimes, and I just say, can we just get on a 10-minute video call? Because I just can't have this conversation. Just can't have these conversations on text or whatnot. And I find that we still have a lot of 5 gazillion Zoom meetings a day. But when you're going to have those one-on-one conversations and stuff, I've noticed that especially since pandemic, when working from home and being able to talk freely, it's like so hard to do that when you're typing it all. And I mean, that's just one of my personal frustrations. And I know people can say, oh well, it really depends on your age. Millennials want to do this more, but it doesn't even matter. It's like we're all human beings, and we need to be able to either speak face to face, even if it's on Zoom, and speak in real time, to have candid conversations, than to have a 20-minute long text conversation with someone.
Difficult conversations are very, or fierce conversations, hard conversations are always a lot harder when you're like smiley faced emoji. But as people are bringing their personal forms of what they're comfortable with in communications and thinking it might work in a professional environment or a business environment, there at least needs to be, I agree with you, there needs, and I'm all for trying to understand everybody's different form of communications and personalization, but it needs to come down to connection. And I really feel that connection needs to have that, you can hear the tone of voice, you can see body language. They're just that human connection really levels the playing field if you're going to have a hard conversation.
It does, and I think that also since pandemic with Zoom and everything, everybody using Zoom, it kind of gives you. I'm looking into your office right now. It gives you a look into people's home lives, and not everybody wants their work colleagues to see their home, see what the environment that they're working in. Especially in New York City, if you're living in an apartment, tiny apartment, and you're sitting on your bed for the meet. Thank goodness you can blur your background, and we have backgrounds that you can use where you don't necessarily have an eye in. But there's something that about pandemic that really has been can demonstrate, like it's almost like an equality thing. I'm getting on a call with a bunch of people, and some of them have beautiful offices in their homes, and I'm sharing my apartment with 12 people in New York City, and I'm calling in from the corner of my bedroom, and I don't want you to see that.
That's a
Yeah.
form of candor. I mean, that's them showing up as their authentic selves. And we all don't get paid the same. We don't get all valued the same. We're at different points in our career, and people shouldn't be punished because they're being honest about where they live and how they live. And yeah, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought of that from a candor perspective of how you show up at work. How would you suggest addressing those that hide behind candor? And we kind of hinted that at the beginning of the, well, I'm just being honest. Well, I'm telling it like it is. And they're like, well, I'm just being, I'm giving candor. Candor is one of the values of our organization. It's on the poster on the wall for our values. So how how do you address that?
It's rough. Well, when I was in my 20s and the story that I told you, I was in no position at all to address that honesty. But now that I'm seasoned, I'll say, a lot older, I would say that if someone is honest and brutal and is hiding behind, well, I'm just saying it like it is. I'm just telling the truth. I mean, I think you have to remind the person that as I said earlier, that you need to be sensitive and kind as well. You can't just be honest. You can't just be transparent and say anything if you're not thoughtful of who your audience is. Who are you talking to? You're speaking to another human being that has feelings. And I mean, it's one thing, to be honest, like, Russell, if you had food on your face, I would tell you. You can know that if you had food on your face or you tracked some toilet paper on your shoe, I'd whisper to you and tell you all about it. But, if you, if you put your foot in it, in a meeting or said something that I thought, I would, again, not publicly, but I would ask to talk to you afterwards. And I would say, I want to let you know what the impact is on how you said what you said. And maybe, maybe instead of saying it this way, there might have been another way to be honest and say what you said. And as a communications person, I have this like free pass to give people feedback all the time, because I can always say, as a communicator, I just want to give you a little feedback. And the thing is, not everybody wants feedback. I'm not gonna, before I give anybody feedback, I ask if they want it, especially, I don't give feedback to people I have no relationship with, because if you have no relationship with someone, they're not going to want your feedback. So it's polite to ask if they would, if somebody would like some feedback before giving it. And if the answer is rarely no, but the answer can be no, and then you have to respect that.
I want you to put your leadership hat on and your communications hat on, as I'm sure you have a lot of experience with onboarding, stay interviews throughout, exit interviews throughout. As a leader, how can you demonstrate to a new employee that candor is okay in those conversations? What are some tips you can provide for that?
Some tips I could provide when interviewing candidates is being honest yourself when they ask questions. Every candidate is asked the question, like, don't tell me what's a typical day at your company, or what are the challenges you face, what keeps you up at night, those sorts of questions. I mean, I'm not saying that, when you're onboarding someone or you're trying to encourage someone to join your company, that you put all your dirty laundry out for them. I mean, you want them to join the company, but being candid about, what some of the challenges are for the position. That, you could say, well, for this position, some of the challenges are, XYZ, and we're hoping that you in this role can help us do ABC to help those challenges. And, I mean, the same is true for, bringing new people into an organization. No place is perfect. Every place has their room for improvement, or, opportunities to make things better. So when you're onboarding new people, don't onboard them by saying, okay, I'm going to have you meet with Joe, who runs this department. He's a real pain. He's not going to, he's probably not going to give you a lot of time, and just make the best of it. I mean, you're not going to like try and be that candid. I try, and I try my best not to color, when people are coming in new, fresh and new, and meeting other people. I try my best. I don't always succeed, but I do try my best not to color their impression. Let them have their own first impression of the company and the people that they're working with. And again, I just, I could say it again and again. The best way to show that candor is appreciated in an organization is to demonstrate it yourself.
And I bet you those conversations probably get a lot more honest as you go through that employee journey, because you have shared experiences. You've built the relationship even more between you and the person you're talking to through those stay interviews, right into the exit interview, where everybody can be super honest.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But, I mean, with that, if you're not candid, if there isn't some level of candor, with your employees or your colleagues, like people aren't going to speak up when something's wrong. If you don't feel safe to speak up, when something goes wrong, you're not going to like ring the bell and say, wait a second, there was a mistake here. Let's see how we can get together and fix this. You're not going to say anything because you don't feel safe. You don't feel like, you don't have that trust with your leadership. So it really behooves an organization to be as candid as possible, because when stuff happens, and stuff will happen, you want employees that are that have each other's backs, that have your back, and that are going to work together towards solutions.
Candor is an absolute trait of a healthy organization, because if you don't have it, then all those things, like you said, if we don't have candid conversations, then bad things are going to fester and fester and fester because nobody's doing anything about it or know about it.
Right.
So Lisa, I have to finish by asking you the question I ask all of my guests, which is, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
I would have to go back to the facts versus story thing that I spoke about. When you're being candid and you're speaking with people, and especially when you're addressing bad things, issues, problems, think about how you can communicate the facts. Think about how you're feeling. What is this problem bringing up for you? What's your story, around this? And try to stick to the facts around a situation without getting all of your emotions. I'm not saying don't have emotions. We all do, and you have to acknowledge your own emotions and those of those around you. But trying to start with the facts and not letting yourself get all heated up with the story is a good way to be candid.
Self-awareness, it's a superpower. That is Lisa Bloch. She is a candor advocate, I'm adding that, and Senior Director of Population Health Communications at Mount Sinai Health System. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for another episode of Relationships at Work, the guide for emerging leaders to create a workplace we love. I don't know if you know this or not, and I was holding this till the end of the episode, but I've got a newsletter. Yep, comes out every week. I pass a note off into your inbox. Thank you, by the way, for those that have already subscribed to it. It's gaining a bit of popularity, so I appreciate that. And if you haven't signed up yet, super easy to do. All you do is go over to my website, russellawlicker.com or relationshipsatwork.ca. And in the top right, it'll say Get Raw Notes. You click on that, you'll get a free employee journal series of interviews, a free template that you can use for onboarding, Thrive interviews, and exit interviews, and also be signed up for free to a weekly newsletter where I share resources, insights, thoughts, articles that I find really, really interesting and thought you might as well. Anyway, if you're looking for a little bit more in resources when it comes to creating that workplace we love, it's a great place to start. Anyway, have a great day. And as always, thanks for joining. Take care.